Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today for this webinar. Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Engelberg, and I am the Associate Director of Recruitment here for the GEM program at the University of Colorado, Denver. And I am joined here today by Jim Marchiori and Susan Morrice, who I will introduce here in a moment. We're extremely excited to have you here for this webcast, and really the purpose of the webcast here today, too, is to describe the uniqueness of GEM's leadership-focused curriculum and the importance of understanding the leadership and executive perspective in the energy field, really regardless of what energy sector that you work in, whether it's oil and gas, renewables, utilities, and so on. So to help go ahead and help demonstrate the importance of understanding the C-suite perspective of the energy industry, we have our panelists, Susan Morrice and Jim Marchiori, who will bring their leadership and executive experience in the energy industry here today. And this is why the webinar is entitled View from the Top, a C-Suite View Perspective. Today, our panels are going to go ahead and answer some questions about leadership in the energy industry, along with the GEM program's role in preparing energy leaders. And before we get started with our panelists here, I just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page in terms of their brief knowledge of the program. So I'll run through a couple slides here right now that introduce our panelists, and we will get the conversation going. All right, so as you can go ahead and see right here, a couple quick facts about the program. First off, the program here is 100% energy focused, and we are all types of energy, so renewables, utilities, oil and gas, all different sectors of it. And you can almost think of it like an executive level energy MBA, for lack of a better term. We also are accredited through the AACSB, which is a top 5% designation that business schools have. And because our program is designed specifically for full-time working professionals, which I know Susan, who will join us here in a moment, and Jim will talk about, we have a blended delivery where you would have 4 days here on campus at the beginning of each 10-week term, and then the remainder of that 10-week term will be online in a hybrid format, and that allows our students to come from all across the country and even the world. I even have a couple students from different continents that'll be joining our upcoming classes here. Lastly, as you can see, we have a strong partnership with the energy industry as well, where we are, we're here, we go ahead and have an advisory council made up of executives in business and government professionals too, that just make sure the curriculum is current and that we discuss the most important trends to help our students be the next generation of energy leaders. Right here as well, a couple quick things. You can see we have over 400 alumni and students worldwide in the program. And one, I think, great fact here too is actually by the time they graduate, 55% of GEM students have received a promotion since they started the program. So a really good return on investment for our students. And actually too, we are having our 20th cohort here begin on January 11th. And we are still working with students for that January class we have as well. And right here, you can quickly see we have a total of 12 courses. These are just some of them, but a lot of business, leadership classes, and even a travel course as an elective, and a couple other ones too that are a little more specific. All right, and those two beautiful faces there are our two panelists that we have, Jim Marchiori and Susan Morrice. I will go ahead and have Jim introduce himself here in a moment, and he'll go ahead and just, Jim, if you don't mind, in a moment, saying your name, affiliation with GEM, and what sector of the energy industry maybe you used to work in, so a little bit about your experience, and we'll go from there.
All right. Yeah, as Glenn said, my name is Jim Marchiori. My connection with GEM has been pretty extensive. I was on the advisory council from about 2011 to 2013, and then from 2013 until April of this year, I was executive director of the program. I retired in April. My background has been primarily in oil and gas, really until I came to GEM, and then from that point on, it was industry-wide. I mean, energy industry-wide, including all different aspects of energy. The work that I've done in the oil and gas sector, it's about 35 years worth of working either as a consultant or as a in-company leader in the general areas of human performance, human development, strategy execution, change management. So all the things that have to do with the way people develop and operate in the energy industry. And so it was an easy switch for me to move over to the GEM program because I'd been running training and career development programs for 30 years before that. Most of my work, well, it's been half and half between international and domestic. So I've been pretty much all over the world and the last 5 years working with Jim.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Jim. And we're having a little bit of video difficulty, so Jim will be joining us via audio today, but I can assure you that is him there that's speaking. And here, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Susan Morrice. She's actually with me here, so she will come to our mini podium to briefly introduce herself.
I'm not sure if I'm quite as tall as you,
Yeah.
Greg. Is my head all right?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Susan Morrice, originally Irish, you could tell by the accent, and a geologist, petroleum geologist. But I, like Jim, I've been involved in the energy, the oil and gas business, and have actually found that the real core, the real success to it is actually getting to know the human potential in a program like GEM, but really being involved in what we call in Belize natural energy, of which I'm co-founder and chair, that oil within, to draw that potential out. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Susan, for that introduction right there as well. And now, one quick thing I want to mention to the audience, we will try to have a Q&A session at the very end. So I think you'll see a little chat box there at the bottom of the screen. So if you want to type a question in, please feel free to do so. And we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of the webinar here today. And right now, we will actually go ahead and start here with our series of questions. And the first one here will go ahead and be for Jim Marchiori. Jim, can you talk a little bit about why the GEM program decided to start the executive in residence that we have and the value that has for GEM students?
Yeah, I can, and hopefully Susan will say something about this too, because she is the executive in residence right now. You know, we took a look at the program, I want to say, going back probably 2.5 years ago now. And, you know, I know one of the questions you want me to talk about later on is the competency model, and this kind of fits in with that. What we realized was that there's more dimensions to leadership in this or any other industry than what you necessarily get in the classroom. And because GEM is a fairly advanced program in terms of career development and where people are in their careers, we looked at it, what we called executive presence as a very important aspect of enabling people to advance in their careers and eventually move into senior and top management roles. And so we thought that the best way to do that was to give our students direct exposure to key leaders in the energy industry, so that they could learn from people who are, you know, actually working at senior leadership levels about what executive presence means. And we kind of bifurcate that into 2 different levels. You know, for the younger and earlier in their career students, the emphasis is really on interacting with senior executives and how do you do that? What is it that what do they want to know from you when you get a chance to get in front of a senior leader in your organization, like the CEO or something? How do you be the person who doesn't babble on and be the one that the CEO says, never put that person in front of me again, right? And, you know, how do you really tailor your message to what senior executives want to learn in a way that they want to learn it? Then for the older or more senior students, it's more about developing their own executive presence and how do they conduct themselves with, you know, the appropriate air of leadership and gravitas in their organization so that they can convey that, you know, that executive nature. And so that's really the genesis of it. And I think that's still a lot of what actually happens, but then there's also a lot of other things that have morphed out of that in the EIR program, a lot of which is just, you know, getting career advice or running business ideas past senior executives and getting their feedback. And we've had, you know, a number of people do that as well.
All right, perfect. Thank you for that, Jim. And yeah, we will actually talk a little more about that with a few questions here, you know, coming up about some of those examples. But in the meanwhile, actually related to that, next question we have here for Susan is, as the current executive in residence here, Susan, can you describe a little more about why you decided to get involved with the GEM program and how that happened?
Well, actually, I was honored to be the commencement's address speech at a graduating, I think it was 2 years ago, graduating class. And I was fascinated by the caliber of the students and also the structure of the program, the flexibility, the desire for leadership, and the realness of the course. That it was real executives and actually the professors having real experience and bringing it to the students worldwide. I was fascinated by the fact that I think there may have been 10 countries represented in the audience at that commencement. And so I really believe in that experiential side, and I loved the flexibility that allowed working executives, it was practical, it was real, to give up, I think it was maybe 4 weekends in the 18 months, long weekends, to come and get together and get to know the staff, people like myself, and each other. And then, therefore, I think you get even more connected. And that presence is not just talked about, but it's developed by speaking engagements to each other and verbally and written. So that would be the general gist of my answer.
Yeah, no, thank you, Susan. And to help clarify too, hello everyone. Here is me. I'm just going to be in the background here, just in case you're wondering where the voice is coming from, that booming voice, right? We do how it's set up with a program to make sure everyone meets in person and can, have the executive and resident experience like that Susan will be helping out with our October class. We have a total of 6 4-day weekends that are on Friday through Monday. That students will come here because just about everyone's working full time. It helps minimize those days off work so you can keep your PTO days for vacation and fun things like that. And actually, Susan, the next question here is for you as well. So overall, can you talk about what you're hoping students will go ahead and learn from your experiences in the energy field as well as leadership?
Well, firstly, I think there's nothing like speaking to the direct person involved. For instance, myself here. How did I actually go from, a little girl in Belfast to discover the first oil in Belize? What were those steps? How can I share them directly with you all, not just over a webinar, but actually really in meeting in one of these weekends? And that's what I love. That's my passion, really, to bring forward everyone with their full potential and utilize the tools that are given to you on the GEM program to go back to your families, communities, countries, and dare I say, even the world, and make a difference. So that's fundamental to me in being involved in sharing the steps that I took to discover the first oil, to build the #1 revenue generator in the country of Belize, and now to be in a huge joint venture partnership with the United Arab Emirates. How did that happen to a wee girl from a city that doesn't even have any oil?
No, that's a great story, Susan. Thank you. And I think overall it's about having everyone cultivate their own leadership style and use the tools and the programs to help them, achieve their dreams and have that skill set. So the next question here actually will be for Jim. Jim, can you describe the GEM competency model for us?
I can, but before I do that, let me just backtrack just a little bit to the EIR program too. One thing that I should have mentioned that I didn't is that the program is also open to GEM alumni. So if there's a particular executive who comes along who isn't there during your tenure as a student, but you want to interact with that person later on, then you have the ability to do that as well. And we have had a number of people do that as the program has progressed. Now, for the competency model, what the competency model is, and this is really one of the examples of how GEM is different from most academic programs, okay? And largely it reflects a couple of different things. One is just the overall design philosophy that has been part of the program from day one. And then the other is the background that I brought when I came in of being essentially in charge of corporate training and career development. And in a corporate setting, typically for advanced and professional positions, you're going to operate off of something called a competency model. And that really is a registry of different knowledge, skills, and attributes or attitudes that people have to be successful in their role. If you go into more hands-on and craft type positions, then you're working off task lists, of things like maintaining a compressor or, balancing accounts or something like that. Competencies are a little bit more vague than that because the jobs are not as well defined at senior levels as they are in terms of performing tasks. And so the competency model we built for GEM was back in, I think, 2014, and we decided to base it on kind of a general director level competency model in most organizations. In other words, what is it that you have to be good at in order to operate as a director or higher in a typical energy organization? And so we built the competency model. There's 4 different clusters to the competencies, 4 competencies per each cluster, so only 16 of them. And they're kind of general personal attributes, business acumen, and now I'm struggling to remember, leading and managing people, and also industry expertise. And the reason we chose those is that, from experience, when companies are doing their succession planning and they're choosing who they're going to invest in as future leaders of the company, the 2 big aspects of that are business acumen, in other words, the ability to make decisions based on business results rather than on technical or other kinds of results, and then the ability to lead and manage people. And those come up time and time again in the discussions and the different elements of succession planning that take place in a company setting. And those are the 2 big criteria by which the company will say, okay, well, Mary is somebody we're going to invest in. This is a future leader. Or Joe is somebody who is going to plateau at the level where he's at right now because he doesn't, he's derailing either on business or on people. And so we built that model for that reason. And then we definitely work with the students to understand that. They'll get briefed on it in the very beginning of their time there, and then several times through. And we built a small self-assessment tool that allows our students to assess themselves against each one of the competencies in the model and all the different associated behaviors with each competency, so that they can kind of get an idea of themselves, of where they want to put their emphasis on personal development. And that feeds into how they operate in the classroom, what kind of projects they choose, and also how they operate with the executives in the Executives in Residence program, because they can kind of direct their learning and direct their experiences to build on their strengths and to shore up their weaknesses in a little bit more systematic way than they would be able to otherwise.
Thank you, Jim, for sharing that as well. Just for a second. And then we have our next question right here. Actually, will be for Jim as well. So, Jim, can you go ahead? Jim, can you go ahead and I guess comment a little more specifically on how the leadership component is involved specifically with the competency model? I believe you mentioned that was, I think, one of the 4 cores of it.
Yeah, I did. And it's not just leadership. As I said in the very beginning, the competency model is really the tool that forms the kind of intellectual framework that makes GEM more applicable to industry and more tied to industry than your typical academic program, because this is something you won't find in most academic programs, even in graduate school. And so because it's built off of basically corporate requirements, and because we use it as the framework for faculty to create their course learning objectives and so on, because in the background, which students never do see, but all this stuff is mapped in the background. So every learning objective in every one of the classes is mapped back to somewhere in the competency model, so that we know we're working on this whole thing. And so specifically with regard to leadership, that's a big chunk of the model, but it also goes back to industry knowledge, business acumen, and even just individual capabilities and qualities that that go into leadership. So without the students actually even seeing it, this forms the whole framework and the whole skeleton of the way the program is designed and the way the learning objectives are built and the way, the way you get tested, the way your progress is evaluated. And then, like I said earlier, you do have that tool, that self-assessment tool that helps you to align yourself, on your own. And that's a completely confidential thing. You don't share that with anybody. It's just your own calibration tool. And so between those two, it really helps to keep the learning and then the overall experience of the program and as Susan said, the experiential learning as opposed to the classroom learning, all kind of aligned in a direction that will, foster your ability to move forward as a leader in the industry.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that, Jim. And actually, too, we had someone that in the audience that asked a question that we'll address later about the difference between this and an MBA, and actually on what Jim was just saying too, why students would be, or we'll say why someone hiring would maybe be interested in our program, versus let's say an MBA if they're looking at two candidates. And we actually already had a question kind of prepared on that later that we'll address. But the next question here we're gonna have for Susan, and to stretch our legs, we'll have her mosey on over here as well. So Susan, can you go ahead and tell me, as someone who makes hiring decisions, promotion decisions for your companies, what features of the GEM program do you think are most attractive to other executive level personnel that are also hiring?
I actually like the sound and the experience of the competency model, because as someone who hires people, you want a model that is replicable. And then we at B&E actually monitor with key performance indicators. So when you get a structure like that someone can actually monitor themselves and can be monitored corporately, it's very, very effective, because you see how they're doing, but they see how they're doing. So that's a critical aspect of that. And the flexibility and focus on all the different energy components, because I've just got back from a big APG conference in Amsterdam on transitions in energy, and Shell, BP, Mobil, the majors were all there, some of the independents, and really recognizing that we're in a change to what is the best energy in a particular area. And how do we work with this holistically, making decisions ourselves and getting ready for that type of attitude to the energy industry, all the way through to we generate our own electricity, we develop our own propanes and butanes, what is needed in a country, in a community. In other words, getting real. And that's what I like about the GEM program.
Wonderful, yeah, and I know Susan and I were even talking a little earlier today about that as well. Just understanding, in the landscape or changing of the two, what's not just current in there, but what will make the most sense, will be the most efficient for it, what's gonna be the most helpful. So just understanding all those perspectives, helps all those tools in your tool belt, so to speak. So Jim, my next question here is for Jim. So Jim, can you discuss how students like I believe it's Pepe Gonzalez and our 14th cohort here have been able to leverage the Executive in Residence program to help them start their own businesses?
Oh yeah, and actually I think a number of students have done that, but Pepe is a good example because he heavily leveraged the EIR program not only as a student but also as an alumnus. And he had a unique business idea that I won't go into too much detail because he's still putting it together, and I don't want to share too much of his details. But it's basically for a tax advantaged approach to supply chain and to recycling of parts and equipment in the industry from one producer to another, because people's needs change from time to time. You may need certain pumps, pipes, vessels, whatever at one point. You don't need them at another point. And he's got a unique approach to managing that in a very tax advantaged way. And he built that business plan as part of one of his courses. I think he built it actually as part of 2 or 3 of his courses, and kind of carried that through different steps of developing that business plan. I know he also spent an extensive amount of time meeting with 2 or 3 of the faculty members who specialized in different areas of things that his business was going to touch and getting their advice. But then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and Glenn, you're a little more current than I am, but I think that Pepe has interacted with every single executive in residence since the program started to run his business past them, to get their ideas and suggestions. I think one of them actually might even have decided that he wanted to invest a little bit in Pepe's business, and I'm not 100% sure of that. But I think that was the case, or at least I know they were talking about it. And so he's kind of an outstanding example of how that can work. And plus, on top of everything else, he's in California. So he's flying in to come see the executives during cohort weekend because he can, right? Because it's a way that he can, leverage his alumni status to get essentially free consulting advice from senior business leaders. Sorry, Susan. but he's a prime example of that. And basically, I would say probably 2/3 of the students who interact with the executives, and not all students do, because it's a voluntary program. You're not required to sign up for executive in residence or go meet with the executives, but we strongly encourage that you do. And of the students who do that, I would say at least 2/3 of them are getting, solid either business or career advice, and that's a lot of what they're focusing on as they're interacting with the executives.
Yeah, absolutely. And even too as well, for the executive residence part, there's sometimes we'll do like a small group luncheon. We'll go ahead and have some one-on-one sessions that you can sign up for, like some project management workshops. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to do that, but help cultivate those relationships too. And it is voluntary, but why not? It's a great part of the program, and there's always something to learn from it too. Just like anything else, I think as well. So. Which is great. Jim, I know you kind of touched on this just now, but I guess kind of on that notion too, are there any other examples of students that have used leadership, like different, you think methods or models that they've learned in GEM to help them grow in their career that kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, well, as I think you and I mentioned one time from our second cohort, Kim Rodell, who started essentially a consulting firm. There was a group of students from cohort 7 who who got together and started a consulting firm. And I believe they named it Cohort 7 Consulting, and it was sort of a very consulting in oil and gas. And so there's a lot of those kind of examples. One of the things that we always do is encourage the students to tie their classwork as much as they can to their businesses, whether it's a business that they want to start or work on, or the companies that they're in right now. So, a lot of times what you'll see projects that grow into ideas, that grow into businesses. I know we had a student from Chile who did projects on solar development in Chile. We had a group in, I think, cohort 15 or 16 who I actually generated the project for, because I'm involved. One of the things that I'm trying to do is create small-scale distributed biomass power generation at a village level for Africa or India. And, they did a lot of analysis on that project for the finances and for the technical aspects of it. A number of students have done business plans for either entrepreneurship projects or intrapreneurship projects. In other words, projects that they're doing within their companies that they needed to have a business plan for. So, really depending on, and you can leverage a lot of those things across 2 or 3 classes too. You might start it off in your accounting class or your economics class, but then later on you're going to pick it up and you're going to take it into the technical aspects of energy science and do that part of it, and then you're going to take it into your advanced finance class and do that part of it, and so on. So you can kind of layer your work if you focus on it. The other aspect of that I always encourage students to do, but few of them actually do it, is that to leverage their fellow students in the program. Because when you get into the GEM program, one of the first things you realize is that being a mid-career program from a diverse background of industry, your fellow students represent some very, very high specialized skill levels. I mean, you're going to have some lawyers, you're going to have some accountants, you're going to have some supply chain people, you're going to have some operations people in your class, all these different aspects. And so you can put together a team for a class project that includes these different specializations. And if you leverage that into either your business that you want to start or into the company where you're working now, so that you're taking actual work problems and bringing them into the class, what you're really doing is you're getting, again, free consulting from industry specialists. You're getting a lawyer, you're getting an accountant, you're getting a supply chain, you're getting an engineer, you're getting all these different people on your team to build this report, and you're not on your own to do it, right? And so it's a real way to leverage resources that you wouldn't probably have access to otherwise.
No, that's great, Jim. And I think a couple of things that are important to note on that too is that one is that for students in the program, they come from a variety of different backgrounds, but I think it helps so much when they can meet for those 4 days here in person, whether it's for the group project or for those connections. And about half our students come from out of the state as well. And some, as I mentioned, are from out of country. So, it definitely is doable for that. And I think just one of the value of being here in person too that we have. So thank you for that, Jim. Our next question actually for Susan here is that as a CEO and executive, what do you value or really, I guess, kind of look for in communication style from your employees?
Well, it's an excellent question following on from Jim. And that is, you can have all the ideas you like, but if you cannot communicate them, you actually won't get them anywhere. So I'm delighted that communication, both orally and written, is a part of the GEM program. It is a critical thing. So many people are shy even, or have different styles. And what you really want to do is learn a bit of a structure in how to communicate, grabbing the attention and realizing how to synthesize what you want to put across, and then understanding how we work, the programming of that concept, that idea into, whether it be your boss or a group of investors that you're speaking to and describing the vision you have going forward. So the art of communication, being Irish, I should know, but the art of communication is really important.
No, absolutely. And yeah, that's actually something that we teach as well here too. With it, a look in case you forgot what my face looks like. But we actually in our classes teach verbal and oral communication styles, getting straight to the point, or like if you're in a boardroom or with executives, what do those situations look like? And we are able to do that too, because just about all our instructors are working full time and on average have 15, 20, sometimes even more experience, and a lot have executive level experience as well too. So that's something we definitely try to leverage, because most of our students, whether it's their own company or trying to grow in theirs, they're typically at that cusp in their career where they need to know how to most effectively work with that as well. So actually, just for the sake of time here too, because we do have a couple questions that are really good here that I see that I want to get to for everyone, I'm going to go through a couple other quick things here as far as the program is concerned. Then we will go ahead and get to those. We'll go ahead and get to those last questions here. So actually, with that here as well, with the questions here too, as you can go ahead and see that we actually have a couple key dates. I just want to point out we have our third webinar that will be on October 18th with actually Colorado State Legislator of the 6th District here, Chris Hansen, as well as Dr. Orlando, one of our instructors here for the our economics class. I'll be talking about energy trends, and it's right near election time too, which no matter what side you're on is always interesting conversation. So that'll be a great one, and I will send out the links and stuff for that as well. Also, if you are local, we do have a prospective student lunch where we have already more than half the room full, but we still have a few RSVPs available, and we'll actually have some alumni and faculty there as well. So it's a great way to get some insight on the program from those that have done it, teach it, and see a few other maybe prospective students as well to get a better feel and see if it's the right fit. Also, we do have our 20th cohort coming up here on January 11th, and you can, as with any of our classes here, observe them in person for that 4-day period, including the one there in October, and you can reach out to me directly for that as well. For the January class, just quickly here too, I won't go into all the details, but if you are interested in applying, of course, I will touch base with you, touch base with everyone afterwards. And the process takes about 2 to 3 weeks. I particularly help students out with that as well. And we do offer the GMAT waiver for those that have experience too. So we will be working with students here until about mid-December, by December 15th to 20th for our application deadline for the January class. So something to keep in mind there. And we usually have a pretty quick turnaround around this time of year too as well. So I know there's a couple questions here that I saw that were great. So I want to go ahead and get to those here now. So give me 1 second here and we will get to those questions shortly. And it looks like the first question here is in regards to the program and the difference from it. So first I will go ahead and actually ask Jim. Jim, the question is, what differentiates an MS in GEM from an MBA, and how are they similar?
Really two major differences. One is that GEM is completely focused on a single industry, energy. And the other is that it's slightly shorter in duration than an MBA program is. The similarities are that the nature of the classes you take are essentially the same classes that you would take in an MBA, except they're energy focused. So you're going to have finance, you're going to have accounting, you're going to have strategy, you're going to have human resources, all the same kind of classes that you would take in an MBA program, but all focused on energy. The reason for that distinction actually goes back to the very beginning of the program. There were 4 companies that were instrumental. They actually approached the university back in 2007, and those were Encana, which is an oil and gas company, Pioneer, which is an oil and gas company, Veneco, and then DCP Midstream, which is a midstream company, which is where I was at the time. I was the director of organization capability at DCP Midstream. And what they did is they looked at their talent pipelines and realized that there had been a dearth of hiring in the industry in a big slump in the 80s and early 90s. And that so when they looked at their upcoming talent, they had a big gap between people who were about to retire and the next generation that needed to replace them. And they wanted to be able to start accelerating the development of that next generation. So they approached the university to create a program like GEM. And so as part of that decision-making process, they went through is it going to be a Master of Science or is it going to be an MBA? And they decided to make it a Master of Science specifically for the reason that if people left their companies, at least they would stay in the industry, where if it was an MBA and they were mixing in, healthcare and high tech and finance and everything like that, people might go through the program and leave the industry altogether, where, in the MS format, with the heavy focus on energy, the chances are that people would be making a career commitment to energy, even if it was to a different company or a different part of the energy industry, that they'd still stay in the energy space. And so when people ask me about, why would I want to do one or the other? To me, the distinction there is really, if you really want to, if you're committed to energy, if you see energy as your future and where you want to be, whether it's wind or solar or oil or nuclear or energy services or any of the other aspects of energy, then that specialized program is a better program for you. If you're not as focused, and if you think that someday you might want to go into healthcare, then the MBA may be the better route. And so it's really a matter of specialization and industry commitment. And it is something that the energy companies, at least the energy companies in Denver, who have high familiarity with the GEM program, they appreciate it. They understand that distinction, and they look at a GEM graduate as somebody who they can assume is going to be in the industry.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that, Jim. And actually to touch on a couple quick points here too, and the next question actually I want to ask Susan here in a moment, is that about 85 to 90% of the students in the program are also in the energy field. So you're not just learning from instructors and faculty who are in the field, but also from students who are too. So in terms of whether it's connections or just learning from that, I think there's a lot of value there. And I think as Jim said, that's right, is that if you want to stay in the energy field, whether that's renewables, energy storage, utilities, oil and gas, I think a lot of students I talk to as well just like the idea that it doesn't box them into one specific one either, but still specific enough where they want to have their career in energy, but there's so many different opportunities that it helps open all those doors. And actually, the next question here I have is for Susan. And Susan, and I'll have you come here in a moment, because I know we mentioned a little bit that business acumen is important to executives when determining, I guess, who to invest in. So in your opinion, why do you think executives might prefer a promotional candidate with the GEM program versus someone that has an MBA? Don't need to put you on the spot.
Well, actually, firstly, I would say an answer to both the questions is there is a tremendous need in the energy business. And if we're looking not just for what we love, what energizes ourselves, but where is the need, both community-wise and globally? Energy, and also being open to all the different forms of energy. That type of person, maybe a holistic person, is what we're looking for. Someone who's got flexibility, someone who can see the environmental side of something, that doing it the right way, whether it be wind, solar, nuclear, oil or gas, all of the above, and the new emerging energies, which we haven't even understood yet. The inventions that are coming down the pipeline. I love Jim's use of the human pipeline. We need to be those humans for humanity. So that's why I would say this specific focus, even though it is very, very flexible and has all sorts of facets in it, it has an energy focus, and that's what I love about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan. And actually, to kind of on that note as well too, we refer to the program almost as an energy MBA, and the reason for that is we have some classes like in marketing, accounting, human capital management, but it's all within the context of the energy industry and all aspects of it. I think that's one of the biggest differences too. No matter what the class, even if the focus doesn't seem to be in energy, it all is with it as well. And actually, a question here too that I'd love Jim and Susan's opinion on it. We'll go with Susan first, ladies first, right? With that, what changes do you anticipate happening in the energy field over, let's say, the next 10 to 15 years or so? And how do you think that GEM students will help be prepared for that by doing the program?
Well, I would say it's not over 10 or 15 years, it's now.
Oh, or yeah.
Absolutely now. And that's why this program is excellent. It's excellent for right now. It literally energizes and informs the student population, whether they be mature or just coming in, about the way forward. Really, for industry, but it's more than just industry. It's awareness, human awareness on this planet right now. Whether it be the Greens or for too long, the division has held us back. What we need to get together on is a common vision, fusion, a common vision going forwards. And I see the GEM program bringing those things together specifically.
Yeah, no, and that's such an interesting point too as well. I'll chime in here for a second before I let Jim answer that, is that I think one way the program does that, I think you'd agree, Susan, is that by having students that represent all different facets of the industry, that's one way to help do that. Not be siloed, but help the fusion together to work together, whether it's environmental regulations, to make sure that everyone can go ahead and coexist together for the betterment of it, ethically. So Jim, I guess on that notion too, and I know you had actually an Energy, I think, 2030 presentation that you've done before as well that talks a little bit about this, but I'm sure the audience would love to hear a little more on your opinion on it. Is that, can you talk about how you anticipate the energy industry changing in the next 10 to 15 years, and in particular, how GEM students will help be prepared to meet those challenges?
Yeah, and this is a little bit technical, but bear with me for a second. If you go back to the beginning of say, my career in energy, and I started in the oil and gas industry in 1981, the nature of the industry has changed radically and will continue to change. It's become much more diverse, not just diversity of people, of course, but the diversity of energy resources, the way energy is used, and so on. But especially with the development of some of the unconventional oil and gas production, and also the really steep declines in the costs of wind and solar, we're entering a world that's different from what it was when I started and what it's been really for the length of the careers of pretty much everybody who's in the industry now, in the sense that, up until the last very few years, and by very few, I mean 3 or 4, it's always been a very supply constrained industry. In other words, whatever industry you could produce, you were going to sell. And so the challenge of leading and running in the industry was all about being able to produce energy, whether it was to build a wind farm or a solar farm, or whether it was to drill and produce oil and gas. But with the relative abundance of oil and gas right now, due largely to shale and unconventional development, and also some other sort of global geopolitical forces, combined with the really, really steep declines in costs around renewables, specifically wind and solar, we're really entering into an era of energy abundance. Now, there are going to be mismatches between the types of energy and the uses of energy that create lumpiness in the system, but it changes the way we have to view energy. We're no longer in a world where everything that you produce, you can sell no matter what the cost. It's going to be much more of a competitive operating environment across different forms of energy, across different operators in the energy space going forward. And so it really does change the nature of the type of person and the type of personality and the type of skill set that's needed to lead effectively in this industry. And it's going to be more and more like that over the next 10 to 15 years as this transition takes hold before it really becomes complete. So, we're trying to step back, as a pro, I shouldn't say we because I'm no longer there, but the GEM program is really making an effort to step back, look at what that world of the future is and say, well, how do we train people not just to be successful now when they finish the program, but thinking in terms of our average student age being 34, well, 15 years from now, those 34-year-olds are going to be 49 or 50, and they're going to be really sort of getting onto the platform of being, senior vice presidents and C-level officers and CEOs in their companies, and they're going to be having to lead in this world that's very different from the experiences of people up to this point. So how do we start giving them the tools now so that, as this transition continues and as they get to the point where they're really in senior leadership roles, they're willing, they're able to take those up. And, the EIR program, interactions with the faculty members, these are all big parts of this in addition to the classroom learning and the actual, hard aspects of the program.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Jim. And yeah, those were the main questions that we have here. So before we go ahead and bid adieu, as they say, Susan, are there any last minute comments or anything else that you want to touch on? Or
I suppose I would only just say one thing, and that is we've been talking about the difference between MBA and the GEM program. I would like to add that the energy industry is exciting, and it wants people to come forward to follow their dreams and to really jump out of the box with these new ideas. It is necessary today. And so I would highly encourage everyone to look very seriously at this program, because it works with what you're doing now. So it's a safe way to take that leap.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And lastly here, with everyone, I want to go ahead and share one last slide. And of course, thank you so much to Susan as well as Jim here for the presentation, for helping out with everything here today. And lastly, right here, you see my contact information there too. So I will go ahead and try to make sure everyone has a recorded version of this in case there's something that you missed, or if you're only able to be here part of the time, so that way you will go ahead and have it and can pause and play at your own leisure. But in the meanwhile, I want to thank everyone again here for attending, and of course Jim and Susan, who are wonderful and able to really give some insight on the kind of C-suite perspective, the leadership, which I think, as you heard from their experience of conversations, is so important for that next generation here of energy leaders. And if you have any questions, of course, or are interested in learning more about the program, potentially applying, or that prospective student lunch we have coming up. We're sitting in on some classes. As the Assistant Director of Recruitment here, I help go ahead and organize and handle all that and help with the application process too. So please always feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. Otherwise, I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their morning or afternoon, depending on where you view this from, and have a wonderful rest of your day.